We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a blessing and gift from God. During the second year after leaving Egyptian slavery, Israel was ready to enter the Promised Land. God had been with them thus far and was now preparing them for the final phase. Our lesson this week tells of the 12 spies sent into Canaan to determine the best way to enter and conquer the land. It is a story of belief and unbelief. As the people continued their journey from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land, their grumbling continued and got so bad that the Lord sent fire to burn up those who were complaining. Moses had to intervene for them with the Lord to put out the fire. But just as soon as this episode was over, the people complained about being tired of the manna and wanted meat to eat. But as if the complaining from the people wasn't enough, Moses' brother Aaron and his sister Miriam complained against Moses out of jealousy. Numbers 12:1-2. God, in his anger, struck Miriam with leprosy, and Aaron appealed to Moses to ask God to heal her. Moses did as Aaron requested, and God said he would do it, but not until Miriam remained outside of the camp for 7 days. After those 7 days, the people continued their journey and made camp on the southern border of Canaan. There, Moses encouraged the Israelites to enter the land without fear and in God's strength. Our lesson begins with Numbers chapter 13. Verses 1 and 2 reads, "The Lord said to Moses, Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe send one of its leaders." In Deuteronomy 1:22 the people came to Moses, and said, "We will send men before us, and they shall survey by what way we must go, and see what is there." But this was the result of their unbelief. They would not take God's word that it was a good land, and that he would, without fail, give them possession of it. How absurd it was for them to want to send men to check out a land that God himself prepared for them. In response to Moses' consultation, the Lord gave his okay, saying, "Explore the land of Canaan." God also said to Moses, a man from every tribe of Israel was to be chosen for this mission. The 12 men selected were well respected in their respective tribes. Verse 17 says, "When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, 'Go up through the Negev and on into the hill country.'" Once the 12 men were chosen, Moses told them to go into the Negev, the south country, then go up into the hill country. Since the Israelites were stationed in Kadesh Barnea, it appears that Moses was sending them into the land of Canaan the shortest way. Verse 18 says, "See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many." Moses also told them that as they explored the land they were to see what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. In verses 19-24, which are not part of our printed text, Moses continued to tell the 12 spies what to look for. This included determining whether the soil was good for growing things, what kind of towns the inhabitants lived in, if the towns had walls protecting them, and if the towns were strongly defended. Then Moses told them to try to bring back some of the fruit from the land. They explored the area from the desert of Zin to Rehob and Lebo Hamath. They entered the land through the Negev and went to Hebron. At the valley of Eshcol they cut off a branch from a grapevine that had an extremely large bunches of grapes on it. They put that branch of grapes on a pole, and it took 2 men to carry it. They also carried some pomegranates and figs. Verse 25 says, "At the end of 40 days they returned from exploring the land." After making a thorough search of the Promised Land, the 12-man exploration team returned to their fellow Israelites at Kadesh Barnea 40 days later. Verse 26 says, "They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land." Upon their return from this 40-day mission, the 12 spies reported back to Moses and Aaron and the entire Israelite people who waited for them at Kadesh Barnea in the wilderness of Paran. As part of their report, the spies also shewed them the fruit of the land. This refers to the pomegranates, figs, and the large cluster of grapes they brought back from their mission. Verse 27 says, "They gave Moses this account, 'We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey.'" Here is its fruit. The returning 12 spies reported that Canaan was a productive and prosperous region. Unlike the barren desert of the wilderness of Paran where they were, Canaan had an abundance of food, water, livestock, and vegetation. The spies supported their report by showing the people a sample of the fruit that grew in the land. Verse 28 says, "But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there." The report so far was favorable and positive, but there was more. Despite the tremendous potential offered by the land, the spies also described a people who were militarily powerful. 10 of the 12 spies reported that the cities are large in size, well fortified and seemingly impossible to enter. These 10 spies also said they also saw the descendants of Anak in the promised land. The children of Anak were dreaded giants who lived in the area around Hebron. These children of Anak were so gigantic that the spies considered themselves as mere grasshoppers compared to them. Verse 1 of chapter 14 says that night all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. Bad news spreads quickly. When the bad report of the 10 faithless spies made its way through the entire camp, the people's imaginations ran wild with thoughts of immense warriors and impenetrable cities. Even the huge cluster of grapes the spies brought back may have convinced the people that everything in Canaan was gigantic. The Israelite camp must have been a scene of wild disorder as the people not only cried, but they also wept that night. They gave in to the perverse tendency we all have, surrender in trying times and magnify our problems and forget God's redeeming grace. Verse 2 says, "All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, 'If only we had died in Egypt, or in this wilderness.'" Once again the Israelites did what seems to have become a pattern, they complained. After weeping and wailing over the report from the 10 spies, they complained against Moses and Aaron. They overlooked the times Moses had selflessly interceded for them and kept God's divine hand from annihilating them for their disobedience. The entire nation murmured against Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "If only we died in Egypt, or in this wilderness." Let's face it, they were lying through their teeth. Verse 5 says, "Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there." Verses 3 and 4 are omitted from our printed lesson, but in verse 3, we are told that as the people became more afraid, they accused the Lord of bringing them along with their wives and children into Canaan to be wiped out in battle by the godless inhabitants of Canaan. So they asked Moses and Aaron, "Were it not better for us to return into Egypt?" This question was followed by the rebellious idea of picking someone to lead them back to Egypt. These ideas that the people were considering were nothing short of mutiny, not only against Moses, but also against God, whose orders Moses was giving to them. According to Nehemiah 9:17, the people actually did appoint such a captain. But these ideas the people were entertaining were so shocking to Moses and Aaron that we are told that Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. It was clear to Moses and Aaron that the people were filled with unbelief and were contemplating rebellious actions. We are not told why Moses and Aaron fell down before the whole congregation of Israel. Undoubtedly they were amazed to see a people throw away their own benefits from God. And second, they fell on their faces to show their great desire for the people to cease their murmurings. Most likely they hoped to work on the hearts of the people through this humble posture, and to prevail upon them not to continue in their rebellion. Verse 6 says, "Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes." Moses and Aaron were not alone. After Moses and Aaron appealed to the people not to be afraid to enter the land, Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, participants in the survey team, tore their clothes. But like Moses and Aaron, the response of the people to the report from the other 10 spies also caused Joshua and Caleb to rip their clothes as a display of shock and grief over the unbelief of their fellow spies, and the rebellion it was stirring up among God's people. Verse 7 says, "And said to the entire Israelite assembly, The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. Joshua and Caleb were willing to take an unpopular stand against the majority of the spies, and advocated doing what God had commanded. The majority of the spies had focused on the negatives, and even seemed to exaggerate and misrepresent the facts. In contrast, Joshua and Caleb focused on the positives and remained objective. First, they said that the land, which we passed through, is an exceeding good land. The land was excellent, even better than anyone could have hoped. Verse 8 says, "If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us." After declaring that Canaan was an excellent land, Joshua and Caleb also said they were convinced that if the people believed the Lord, which would please him, he would enable them to successfully enter the promised land and take possession of it. Joshua and Caleb then added that the land that God would give to them was a land which flows with milk and honey. These two spies believed that the sovereign Lord would bless his people with a land that was fertile and potentially prosperous. But most importantly, by faith, Joshua and Caleb remembered the covenant that God made with Abraham to bring his descendants to Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 9 says, "Only do not rebel against the Lord. And do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." Then Joshua and Caleb urged the people not to be disloyal to God, not to be rebellious and go against the Lord's commands to enter the land. In addition, they were urged not to fear the inhabitants who already occupied Canaan. God would enable his people to successfully prey on the enemy. They also said that their defense is already exposed, and without protection, because the Lord was with his people. Therefore, Joshua and Caleb told the Israelites not to fear them. Verse 10 says, "But the whole assembly talked about stoning them." Joshua and Caleb put themselves at great risk by encouraging the people to trust God, act on his word, and move quickly to take possession of the promised land. The 10 cowardly spies certainly outvoted Caleb and Joshua and turned the congregation against them. Sadly, the whole congregation talked about stoning them. But as these murderous threats were being spoken by the people, the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. When God's servants are in the utmost situations, he intervenes. God intervened here, and this prompted Moses to intercede on behalf of the people. Those who faithfully expose themselves for God are sure to be taken under his special protection, and shall be hidden from the rage of men, either under heaven or in heaven. Key verse: "If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us." Numbers 14:8. Caleb and Joshua did not refute the report of the other spies, but simply tried to remind the people that the God who promised the land to them is sufficient to fulfill his word and deliver that land. They emphasized that if God is pleased with the Israelites, the land will be theirs. Joshua and Caleb are reminding the people of the power of the same God who delivered them from Egypt. Joshua and Caleb believed in God and that it was his will to inhabit the land. Because they followed God completely, they would be the only ones of the first generation to enter the promised land. God always honors those who have faith in him and carry out his will. Thought to remember: in the midst of unfaithfulness, God remains faithful. Fear is a natural reaction to the unknown, and it could lead to feeling that God has forsaken you. When we panic, feel anxiety and frustration because we do not know what lies ahead, we may run to our leaders for help. Leaders can encourage us to continue to follow God wherever the call might lead. Think about how you can be a leader, like Joshua and Caleb, who encourage people to face their fears and overcome obstacles to see them succeed. God is faithful to us, and even when we feel alone, God is with us. Our lesson next week is entitled, "Faithful in Consequences." Our biblical reference is Numbers 14:10b, 20. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this week's lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. We wish you can join us at the Cubao Church of Christ soon. Our congregation is a place to discover faith, find new friends, grow closer relationship with Christ and serve with each other's gifts. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.